And then to end the show here, this is something that, again, shout out to ESPN. I'll give them some credit for inspiring me on the idea here. Basically, they put out an article that went over, and they asked all of their analysts across the board what their best signing was, what their biggest head scratcher was, what they saw was the best bargain of free agency, and then what was the most improved team overall. So I went ahead and did the same thing myself. The first one we'll look at is just best signing, and there were a few that I really like from this past free agency now. We're like, 10, 11 days into it, going on 2 weeks. There was a few different things that I juggled, but I kept going back to one that I honestly really liked from the very moment I saw it. And it was one that I didn't really expect, but in hindsight makes a ton of sense. And that's going to be the Rams going ahead and bringing in wide receiver Davante Adams on a 2-year deal, which is essentially just a 1-year kind of rental lease, whatever you want to call it, with Davante. Him being on the Rams just makes so much sense in my eyes. And we just kind of talked about Aaron Rodgers a second ago, and Davante Adams kind of fits in this same situation here. Yeah, his time with the Las Vegas Raiders at the beginning of the last season was not great. He only had 200 and some change as far as yardage was concerned. He had the hamstring injury, air quotes for those of you that are just listening. But ultimately, he goes to New York to play with Rodgers. Took a little bit of time, but he picked things up, especially late in the season. He showed that he definitely has plenty of gas left in the tank. And in the 11 games with the Jets, he racked up 800 of the 1,000 yards he had last season. He was averaging 1 yard per reception more than he was in Las Vegas just a few weeks prior to getting traded and before the hamstring injury popped up. So this is one that makes a ton of sense to me. On top of that, when you look at what the Rams are doing right now currently, as they had, of course, Cooper Kupp, who had just missed a ton of time over the last 2 or 3 seasons, basically since the 2021 crazy season he had. But Adams, he missed maybe 1 game in the last 3 years. This is somebody who's always available, never really missing time, and he hasn't actually been injured, I guess is the best way to put it. Prior to last season, hasn't actually been hurt in quite some time. He's always readily available. You bring him in, Puka Nacua is the number 1. You got Kyren Williams in the backfield, offensive mastermind and Sean McVay. Matthew Stafford is the one throwing the football. Maybe Davante Adams isn't as athletically at the level he was when he was dominating the NFL and the consensus best wide receiver in the league, but he can still run routes better than the rest of them. On top of that, his ability to play coy and not necessarily let the defender know the ball is going to get there until it actually gets there at the very last second. The stuff that he does with his hands when the ball is coming towards him is stuff that every single wide receiver in the NFL, if they don't already do it, needs to learn, because he leaves defenders guessing until the very last second, and it's so impressive to watch. This one's huge for the Rams. And for a team that a lot of people, myself included, did not expect to be as good as they were in the playoffs this past season, they look like they're reloading and ready to make a legitimate run now. And I'm really excited to see what this offense can look like with Puka and Davante, because health was a big issue for the Rams last year. If they stayed healthy, we saw what happened. As soon as the Rams got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp back at the same time, that offense exploded and looked completely different. So if we get a healthy unit at wide receiver, Puka doesn't go down with a freak thing, Davante seems to just not really have any issues with injuries whatsoever, ever, at least as of late. I mean, this is an offense that can really fly, especially with Kyren in the backfield, Matt Stafford throwing the football. I'm ready to see what the Rams look like this year. Very excited. Biggest head scratcher for me, and this one, honestly, I didn't really have to put a ton of thought into, because the moment I saw it and I saw the numbers, I saw the length of the deal, and Steelers fans, I'm sure you'll have something to say on this one here. Biggest head scratcher, got to be the Titans dishing out the money that they dished out for Dan Moore Jr. The third most guaranteed money given to anyone in this free agency period. 4 years, $82 million deal, $50 million of that guaranteed. I'm a little bit interested in what the thought process was behind all of that, because I've heard plenty from Steelers fans and also just read plenty from Steelers fans about their thoughts and feelings towards Dan Moore Jr. and his performance over the last 4 years that he was in Pittsburgh. And I mean, you look at, and it's PFF, take it for what you will, but they're the only people that have this kind of stuff out there for us to reference. So if anyone doesn't like their stuff, feel free to put your own version of it out. I would love to be able to reference it as well. PFF grading him at 63rd of all offensive tackles last year in pass blocking, and then 73rd in run blocking. And on top of that, he had, yes, the 10th most pass blocking snaps of any offensive tackle last year, but he was tied for 9th most in pressures allowed with 41 with a few other guys. And then he also had the highest number of sacks allowed with 12. Again, all those numbers coming from PFF. That's just an awful lot of money for somebody who is barely even ranked within the top 32 of either left or right tackle in the NFL. I understand he's young and he has a ton of experience as a starter, and that's something that you don't necessarily come across all at once, but again, just kind of left me scratching my head. And I do understand in the sense that like the Titans O-line needed help. I do get that. Offensive line has not been perfect over there in Tennessee for the last couple of seasons. So I get needing to add to it. And maybe that was just Tennessee going, all right, like, what do we do here? How do we address a need? And you know, maybe that was the solution. We go after a guy that clearly other teams are bidding on, or that contract wouldn't be as big as it was. Just kind of feels like a bit of an overpay in my eyes. So we'll see what happens with it, but definitely the one that left me scratching my head the most. Best bargain. Another one that I did not really have to put a ton of thought into, because as soon as I saw it pop up, I was like, this makes so much sense. Najee Harris going to the Chargers. 1 year, fully guaranteed, $5.25 million going his way. Again, simply a no-brainer as soon as I saw this pop up here. Los Angeles has one of the most badass offensive lines in the NFL right now, and they know how to get guys moving on the ground. I am so excited to see what Najee Harris can do here, because Najee Harris, in my eyes, is like, if you look up Grindr in the dictionary, a picture of Najee Harris should be right next to it when you're talking football here, because this is a guy who has had no less than 250 rushing attempts every single season of his career. He's always hit the 1,000-yard rushing mark, and over those 4 years, averaged 4 yards per carry or more. There has been some contention about his ability and just how explosive of a runner he was during his time in Pittsburgh. And I know that there was a certain point as well where people were calling for Warren over him. And there were stretches where maybe, you know, Warren was playing better than he was. I get it. But Najee Harris was the dude there. And I'm curious to see what Pittsburgh does now post Najee Harris era. That was a fun 4 years for him in the black and gold. But I am really looking forward to Najee Harris running behind this offensive line, and things could really open up for this offense in Los Angeles. They got to get another wide receiver to really round out the group of guys, but now you have Najee in the backfield. You have yourself, of course, Justin Herbert, one of the better O-lines in the NFL, and then, of course, Ladd McConkey looked like a stud last year. They went and got Mike Williams back on a cheap deal. I don't think that's going to be the end of what they do as far as the wide receiver room goes. They've got to add another piece there, and I think they look to the draft again to see if they can find a complementary piece to go along with Ladd McConkey. But this is an offense that I'm really looking forward to seeing, because I think Najee Harris, and this is a guy who hasn't caught a ton of passes as of late, but don't forget that he's not just a bruising running back. He caught 74 receptions, maybe a little bit more out of necessity than anything else his rookie season, but 74 receptions is still 74 receptions. Like, receivers struggle to hit 50 receptions in a season, let alone nearly 75 as a running back. So he can catch out of the backfield. He's shown he can. He's got 6 receiving touchdowns in his career. He caught 3 his first and second season, both. So, I mean, this is one that just felt like a no-brainer. Soon as I saw it, loved the signing, and I'm wicked excited to see what he does there. And then finally, I saved this one for last because I think it's a nice just overview of where we stand currently as free agency is now heading into week number 3. We're wrapping up week 2. Who is the most improved team? You could obviously point to the Patriots, the Bears. Bears made a ton of trades to boost up the O-line, spent some money to boost up the O-line, spent some money to boost up the defense a bit as well. Both the Patriots and the Bears have spent a ton of money rebuilding or just retooling their rosters, more so in the Bears end in my eyes. But both of them did a great job in making their rosters, at least on paper, look better than they did last season. But for me, it's not either of those two teams. It's a team that we saw in the NFC Championship this past season, and I'm not talking the Eagles, the Washington Commanders. Yes, losing Jonathan Allen and Dante Fowler Jr., not ideal on the defensive front, but the Jonathan Allen split was something that we saw coming well in advance. Dante Fowler Jr., 10.5 sacks last season, really productive. He's one of those guys that slow start to his career, but it's just been like a hired mercenary where he just comes in off the edge for whoever brings him in for that season, and he's productive. But Dante Fowler Jr., and Jonathan Allen needing to get replaced. They did so with Javon Kinlaw already on the interior there. I do think that there is probably a good chance that they're probably targeting one of the top edge rushers in this year's draft to go and help fill out that defensive line a little bit further. But then it was the trades for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil. And I know there's a lot of people outside of Washington right now that are talking about Deebo Samuel being cooked and the 49ers completely burned out all the tread on his tires a few seasons ago when they had him playing running back and receiver. I like the idea of Deebo coming into Washington and not being overly relied upon as like the guy in the offense. And he does not have to be that there because Jayden Daniels is a huge threat on his own, both with his arm and his legs, and you're going to really be able to scheme up some really tricky plays with Deebo Samuel in the mix now as well. And of course, you still have Terry McLaurin, the backfield led with Brian Robinson, so you don't need him to play running back. You could just have him play wide receiver, and you can put him in some packages here and there if you really want to get creative. But I love the Deebo Samuel addition to them, more than maybe some other people do. Then the addition of Laramie Tunsil, that's just, we recognize the offensive line is not perfect, and it probably looked better last season than it actually was because Jayden Daniels is just so good moving around in the pocket. That was a clear admission to that, an acknowledgement, and they were like, what are we going to go do? Get one of the best pass protectors in the game in Laramie Tunsil. And you really didn't have to give up that much. Like, yeah, kind of a lot of draft capital, but this is a team that made it to the NFC Championship. I don't think that trade ultimately and that relinquishing of capital in the draft is really going to kill them in the long run. That was, you get a cornerstone guy on the blind side for Jayden Daniels. That's something that the Patriots probably should have been in on doing, and I'm surprised that there wasn't more conversation surrounding them trying to make that same trade because that's a guy that they definitely could have used in my eyes. And then Jonathan Jones, great veteran pickup for the defense. I like that one. Replacing Jeremy Chin is something that they still got to do. But, I mean, overall, the way I look at Washington right now, they are far and away more improved than they were last season. They are ready to rock and roll. You got a cornerstone left tackle. You got another big play threat playing alongside Scary Terry. Like, there is so much to be excited about in Washington. And again, yes, you can look at the Patriots, you can look at the Bears and go, yeah, far more improved. Look how much money they spent. Look at all the players they brought in. That's all on paper. Same with Washington. But in my eyes, I think Washington did just enough to really push themselves potentially over the edge and maybe even represent the NFC in the Super Bowl next year. They got to go through Philadelphia and Saquon Barkley in that offensive line. But I really like the direction Washington's going in. So I think I'm going to land with them on that one there.